The crystal chandelier above table 12 cast dancing shadows across my untouched Caesar salad as I checked my phone for what had to be the 73rd time tonight. 10:15 p.m. 3 hours and 15 minutes I'd been sitting in Milano's, the city's most exclusive restaurant, watching the waiter approach with that same mixture of professionalism and pity that made my cheeks burn with shame. "Mum, perhaps we should wrap up your meal? The kitchen will be closing soon." His voice carried the kind of gentle firmness reserved for situations like this. The woman whose date never showed, whose anniversary dinner had become a public display of abandonment. Around me, couples laughed over their tiramisu, their joy cutting through me like shards of glass. The elderly pair at table 9 were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary, their hands intertwined across the white tablecloth. The young couple by the window couldn't stop staring into each other's eyes, completely lost in their bubble of new love. And here I sat, alone, nursing the same glass of Pinot Noir while my 3-year relationship crumbled in real time. But here's what that pitying waiter didn't know, what none of these happy couples could possibly understand. I'd lived this exact nightmare before, every excruciating, humiliating second of it. The difference was in my past life, and yes, I know how completely insane that sounds, but death has a way of giving you perspective on impossible things. I'd waited here until the restaurant closed, sobbing into my ossobuco while the staff whispered about the pathetic woman at table 12. "Actually," I said, standing abruptly and placing a crisp $100 bill on the table, "I think I'm done waiting." The waiter's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He'd clearly expected another stammered excuse about my boyfriend running late, another desperate check of my phone, another 20 minutes of watching me slowly fall apart in public. Instead, he got confidence. Real, bone-deep confidence that surprised even me. You see, I knew exactly where Kevin was right now. I knew because I'd discovered the truth in my previous life, though it had taken me 2 more years of lies and broken promises before I'd finally seen it clearly. 3 floors above this very restaurant, in the penthouse ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, Kevin was celebrating Sarah Chen's 25th birthday. Sarah Chen, his boss's daughter, the woman whose late-night texts had been slowly poisoning our relationship for months, while I planned our future like a fool. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing my reflection in the polished gold interior. The woman staring back at me looked different than she had this morning. Gone was the eager, hopeful expression I'd worn while getting ready for our anniversary dinner. Gone was the nervous energy I'd felt choosing this black dress, the one I'd bought specifically to make Kevin proud, to show him what he had in me. Now, that same dress felt like armour, like a declaration of war. I pressed the button for the penthouse level, my heart hammering against my ribs as the elevator began its climb. Each floor that passed felt like shedding another layer of the woman I used to be. The woman who made excuses for Kevin's late nights, who believed his stories about important client dinners and mandatory networking events, who'd been too trusting to see the neon bright warning signs flashing all around me. In my previous life, I died learning the truth about Kevin. Literally died. Flatlined in a hospital bed after a car crash caused by chasing his lies through city traffic at 2 a.m. While I'd been fighting for my life, Kevin had been planning his future with Sarah. He'd inherited everything I'd worked for because I'd been too naive to protect myself legally. 6 months after my funeral, he'd married Sarah in a ceremony that probably cost more than my entire life insurance policy. But death teaches you things, like how much you're actually worth when you stop begging others to see it. The elevator stopped at the penthouse level, and through the glass doors of the ballroom, I could see the party in full swing. Golden light spilled out, carrying the sound of laughter and clinking champagne glasses. Designer dresses swirled across the dance floor, while men in expensive suits made small talk that could make or break careers. This was Sarah's world. Old money, established connections, the kind of social ladder Kevin had been desperately trying to climb since the day we met. And there he was, my Kevin, looking more relaxed and happy than I'd seen him in months. His arm was draped casually around Sarah's tiny waist as she opened presents worth more than most people's cars. He threw his head back, laughing at something she whispered in his ear, his smile genuine in a way it never was with me anymore. The sight should have destroyed me. In my past life, it had. Tonight, it felt like confirmation. I walked past the ballroom entrance, my heels clicking confidently on the marble floor. In my previous life, I'd learned something that had been too broken to act on at the time. Alexander Reeves, the mysterious owner of this entire hotel empire, had been watching that night. He'd seen my humiliation, witnessed Kevin's cruelty, and approached me with a kindness I'd been too shattered to fully appreciate. The private elevator to Alexander's personal penthouse required a special keycard, but as I approached, the doors opened before I could even press the call button, as if he'd been expecting me. And there he was, Alexander Reeves himself, looking exactly as I remembered him, but somehow I was seeing him clearly for the first time. He was tall, probably mid-40s, with the kind of distinguished presence that came from never having to prove anything to anyone. Silver threaded through his dark hair, and his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. But it was the way he looked at me that stopped my breath, like I was worth something, like I mattered. I was wondering when you'd finally decide to stop waiting for things that were never meant for you, he said, his voice carrying that quiet authority I remembered. But now I could hear the warmth underneath it, the genuine concern that had been there all along. I stepped into his private elevator, feeling the shift in energy as the doors closed behind me. I'm done accepting less than I deserve. The elevator began climbing toward his penthouse, and Alexander studied me with those penetrating dark eyes. You look different than you did at the charity gala last month. Stronger. Last month. He was referring to the event where Kevin had abandoned me at our table to network with potential clients, leaving me to smile politely while board members asked where my boyfriend had disappeared to. I'd made excuses then, played the understanding girlfriend while dying inside from embarrassment. Last month, I was still making excuses for someone who didn't deserve them, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Tonight, I'm making different choices. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse, and I stepped into a world that redefined luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city lights, while museum-quality artwork and rich furnishings spoke of wealth so established it didn't need to announce itself. This wasn't Kevin's borrowed status or Sarah's inherited privilege. This was power built from intelligence, vision, and ruthless business acumen. Alexander moved to a bar that probably cost more than my car, selecting a bottle of wine I recognized from magazine articles about the world's most expensive vintages. To better choices, he said, offering me a crystal glass that caught the city lights like captured starlight. To finally knowing my worth, I replied, accepting the wine and feeling its weight in my hand, substantial, real, valuable. As we stood there, the city spread out below us like a glittering kingdom. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin. I glanced at it and had to laugh at the audacity. Running super late, babe. Sarah's party is going way longer than expected. Just order whatever you want and I'll pay you back tomorrow. Love you. I showed Alexander the message, watching his expression darken like storm clouds gathering. He doesn't even realize what he's lost yet, Alexander said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that made my pulse quicken. He will, I replied, turning off my phone and setting it aside with finality. But by then, it'll be too late. Through the penthouse windows, I could see the hotel's ballroom lights, twinkling 20 floors below. Kevin was down there right now, celebrating someone else's milestone, while forgetting the anniversary of our 3 years together. In a few hours, probably around 2 a.m, when Sarah's party finally wound down and he remembered he had a girlfriend, he'd come looking for me with his practiced apologies and calculated tears. But he wouldn't find me broken and desperate in that restaurant, crying over cold pasta while the staff cleaned up around me. He wouldn't find me at home, pacing the apartment we shared, making excuses for his absence to worried friends who'd started asking uncomfortable questions about our relationship. He'd find me gone. And if he bothered to ask the right questions, if his ego could handle the blow to his pride long enough to actually investigate, he'd learn exactly who I'd chosen instead. A man who owned the very building where Kevin was celebrating his betrayal, who had more power in his little finger than Kevin would accumulate in 10 lifetimes, who looked at me like I was a queen instead of a convenience. Alexander refilled my wine glass, his fingers brushing mine for just a moment. The contact sent electricity through my entire body, reminding me what it felt like to be desired rather than tolerated. "Tell me something," he said, his voice low and intimate. "What finally made you realize you deserved better?" I thought about that night in the hospital, the way the machines had beeped as my life slipped away, how Kevin never even knew I was dying because he'd been too busy celebrating his new life with Sarah. I thought about waking up in this timeline, given a chance to rewrite my story, to choose differently. "I died," I said simply, watching his eyes widen slightly. Not literally, well, not in this timeline anyway. But the woman who would have waited for him until closing time, who would have forgiven him tomorrow morning, who would have spent the next 2 years watching him choose everyone else over her, she's gone. I buried her the moment I stood up from that table. Alexander set down his wine glass and moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Expensive, masculine, nothing like the drugstore body spray Kevin doused himself in. "And who are you now?" I looked out at the city lights, at the empire spread below us, at the reflection of a woman I barely recognized in the window. "I'm someone who finally understands that love isn't supposed to feel like begging. I'm someone who realizes that the right person won't make me wait 3 hours for a text back. I'm someone who's about to show the man who forgot our anniversary exactly what he's been taking for granted." As if summoned by my words, my phone lit up with another text from Kevin. Then another and another. Someone had probably told him his girlfriend never showed up to their anniversary dinner, that she'd left after 3 hours of waiting. The panic was setting in, but I didn't even glance at the messages. Instead, I raised my wine glass to Alexander, feeling more alive than I had in years. "To second chances," I said. "To getting what you deserve," he replied, his eyes holding promises that made my heart race. The real show was just beginning. The wine tasted like liquid confidence. Alexander and I moved to the plush seating area overlooking the city. My phone continued buzzing incessantly on the bar where I'd abandoned it, Kevin's panic growing more desperate with each ignored message. But I felt nothing. No guilt, no second-guessing, no urge to rush back and soothe his wounded ego with forgiveness he hadn't earned. "You're remarkably calm for someone whose boyfriend is apparently having a meltdown," Alexander observed, settling beside me on the leather sofa, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, but respectful enough to let me set the pace. "Ex-boyfriend," I corrected, surprising myself with how easily the words came. "He just doesn't know it yet." Alexander's laugh was rich and genuine. "I have to admit, I've been watching you for months, wondering when you'd finally see what was right in front of you, the way he treated you at every public event, the way he'd abandon you the moment someone more useful walked into the room." "You were watching me." The question came out more breathless than I'd intended. His dark eyes met mine, and I saw something there that made my pulse quicken. "Eleanor, you're the kind of woman who lights up every room she enters. The only person who couldn't see that was you." Eleanor. He knew my name, not just knew it, said it like it meant something. When was the last time Kevin had said my name like that? I couldn't remember. "Tell me about him," Alexander said, refilling my wine glass. "What made you think someone like that was worth 3 years of your life?" I considered the question, watching the city lights blur slightly through the wine's golden haze. In the beginning, Kevin was attentive. He made me feel special, like I was the only woman in the world. He'd text me good morning and good night, bring me flowers on random Tuesday afternoons, tell me I was perfect exactly as I was. And then he got comfortable. The texts became sporadic, then non-existent. The flowers stopped. The compliments turned into suggestions for improvement. Maybe I should wear more makeup. Maybe I should dress differently for his work events. Maybe I should be more understanding about his career demands. I took a long sip of wine, feeling the truth pour out of me like a confession. By the end, I was grateful for scraps of his attention. I thought that was love. Alexander's jaw tightened. That's not love, Elena, that's control. My phone buzzed again, and this time I glanced at it. Kevin had sent 12 messages in the last 10 minutes, each one more frantic than the last. The final one made me laugh out loud. Where are you? The restaurant said you left hours ago. I'm calling the police. The police? Alexander raised an eyebrow as I showed him the message. Because his girlfriend didn't wait 3 hours for him to remember she existed? In my past life, I would have rushed home to calm him down. I would have apologized for leaving, for making him worry, for not being more understanding about his situation. I set the phone face down on the coffee table. I spent 3 years apologizing for having needs. And now I'm done shrinking myself to make room for someone else's ego. Alexander stood and walked to the windows, his hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed his empire. You know, I built all of this because I got tired of watching people like Kevin succeed while treating others like stepping stones. Men who inherit opportunity and mistake it for talent. Men who take extraordinary women for granted because they have never had to earn anything in their lives. Sarah's father gave Kevin his job, I said quietly. I used to think it was because Kevin was brilliant, driven, destined for success. But really, it was because Kevin was dating me, and Sarah's father thought I was a good influence on him. The irony is perfect. Kevin got his foot in the door because of me, and now he's throwing me away for the boss's daughter. Karma has a sense of humour, Alexander agreed, turning back to me. But sometimes karma needs a little help. The way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. What do you mean? Instead of answering directly, Alexander walked to his desk and pulled out a tablet, bringing it back to where I sat. Kevin works for Chen Industries, correct? Import, export, specialising in luxury goods from Asia? I nodded, wondering where this was going. Chen Industries has been trying to secure a contract with my hotel chain for months. They want to supply all our high-end furnishings, artwork, even the linens. It would be worth about $50 million annually. Alexander's smile was predatory. The decision comes down to me. My breath caught. I'm saying Kevin's entire career trajectory depends on a contract that I have complete control over. And after watching how he's treated you, I'm feeling less and less inclined to do business with his company. The implications hit me like a thunderbolt. Kevin wasn't just cheating on me with his boss's daughter, he was essentially cheating on me with his own career advancement. And Alexander held the power to destroy it all. That's brilliant, I whispered. But won't it hurt innocent people at the company? Chen Industries will survive. They're well diversified, and this is just one potential contract among many. But Kevin staked his entire reputation on delivering this deal. He's promised Sarah's father that his connections, meaning you, though he never gave you credit, would help secure it. Alexander's eyes glittered with dark amusement. Without this contract, he becomes just another mid-level employee who's dating the boss's daughter. Not exactly the power player he's been pretending to be. My phone erupted with an incoming call. Kevin's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment I felt a phantom pang of the old programming. The instinct to answer, to soothe, to fix whatever was wrong. But then I looked at Alexander, saw the respect in his eyes, remembered the woman I'd chosen to become. I declined the call. "Good girl," Alexander murmured, and the approval in his voice sent heat racing through my veins. The call immediately came again, and again. On the fourth attempt, I finally answered, putting it on speaker so Alexander could hear. "Eleanor, thank God! Where the hell are you? I've been worried sick!" Kevin's voice was pitched higher than usual, panic making him sound almost hysterical. "I'm fine, Kevin, just busy." "Busy? Busy where? You were supposed to wait for me at the restaurant. I texted you that I was running late." 3 hours late, I said calmly, "for our anniversary dinner that you forgot about because you were celebrating Sarah's birthday." Silence stretched between us, broken only by Kevin's heavy breathing. "How did you—" I mean, it wasn't like that. It was a work obligation, Eleanor. You know how important— "I know exactly how important Sarah is to you," I interrupted. "More important than keeping your promises to me. More important than our relationship. More important than basic respect." "Eleanor, baby, you're being dramatic. Just come home and we'll talk about this like adults." Alexander mouthed something to me. Ask him about the contract. A wicked idea formed in my mind. "Actually, Kevin, I wanted to ask you about something. You know that big contract you've been working on? The one with the Meridian hotel chain?" Kevin's tone immediately shifted, becoming eager. Yeah, that's actually part of why tonight was so important. Sarah's father wanted me to network with some of the hotel executives at her party. It's all about building relationships, you know? Making connections that will benefit both of us in the long run." "Both of us?" "Well, you know what I mean. What's good for my career is good for our future together." Alexander was shaking his head, his expression a mixture of disgust and amusement. Here was Kevin, caught red-handed, prioritizing another woman, and he was still trying to spin it as being for my benefit. "Kevin," I said sweetly, "what would you do if that contract fell through?" "What? Why would you ask that? It's not going to fall through. I've got this handled, Eleanor. I've been working on this for months. Sarah's father trusts me with it." "But, hypothetically, if it did fall through, what would happen to your career?" The pause that followed was telling. Well, it would be a setback, obviously. But it's not going to happen. Eleanor, why are you asking about this? Where are you right now?" I looked at Alexander, who was watching me with something like pride. "I'm exactly where I need to be, Kevin. For the first time in 3 years, I'm exactly where I belong." "What the hell does that mean? Eleanor, you're scaring me. Just come home." "I am home," I said, looking around Alexander's penthouse, feeling more at peace than I had in months. "I'm finally home." I ended the call and immediately blocked his number. The silence that followed felt like freedom. "How do you feel?" Alexander asked. "Powerful," I admitted. "Terrified, but powerful." "Good. Power should be a little frightening. It means you're taking it seriously." Alexander moved closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Eleanor, I want you to understand something. What I'm offering you isn't just revenge against Kevin. It's a chance to step into the life you actually deserve. But only if you're ready to leave the old you behind completely." "What are you offering me?" "Everything," he said simply. "A partnership, a real partnership, where your intelligence and strength are valued, not diminished, where you're seen as an asset, not a liability, where you're treated like a queen, not a convenience." My heart hammered against my ribs. "And Kevin will learn what happens when you discard something precious. But that's secondary to what matters most. You finally getting what you're worth." Through the windows, I could see the hotel's ballroom, where Sarah's party was still in full swing. Kevin was probably down there right now, panic-stricken and confused, maybe even starting to realise that his carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. But I wasn't thinking about Kevin anymore. I was thinking about the woman I'd been an hour ago, sitting alone in that restaurant, accepting scraps of attention from someone who'd never seen my value. And I was thinking about the woman I was becoming, sitting in a penthouse with a man who looked at me like I was worth conquering cities for. "Alexander," I said, my voice steady with newfound certainty. "I'm ready." His smile was devastating. "Then let's give Kevin a show he'll never forget." Alexander's fingers traced the curve of my jaw as he spoke, sending electricity through every nerve ending. "There's something you should know before we take this any further. Kevin isn't the only one who's been watching you, Elena. I've had my eye on you since the moment you walked into that charity auction 6 months ago." 6 months ago? My voice came out breathier than intended. But Kevin and I were perfectly miserable together even then. You spent the entire evening apologising for his behaviour while he flirted with every woman in the room. Alexander's thumb brushed across my lower lip. "I remember thinking that if you were mine, I'd never let you out of my sight looking that beautiful." The weight of his words settled over me like silk. 6 months. He'd been noticing me for 6 months while Kevin had been taking me for granted, treating me like an accessory he could ignore whenever something more interesting came along. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" "Because you weren't ready. You were still making excuses for him, still believing you could fix whatever was broken between you." Alexander's eyes darkened. "But tonight, when I saw you walk past that party entrance instead of bursting in to confront him, I knew something had changed. You'd finally stopped fighting for someone who'd never fight for you." A soft chime indicated the private elevator was in use. Alexander glanced at his security monitor and smiled grimly. "Speaking of fighting, it appears Kevin has finally worked up the courage to come looking for you personally." My stomach clenched. "He's here, in the hotel, demanding to speak with management about his missing girlfriend. My security team is handling him appropriately." Alexander's smile was predatory. "Would you like to watch?" Before I could answer, he'd activated a wall-mounted screen that showed the hotel's main lobby in crystal-clear detail. There was Kevin, dishevelled and wild-eyed, arguing with 2 impeccably dressed security guards while the concierge looked on with barely concealed disgust. "You don't understand!" Kevin's voice came through the speakers, pitched high with desperation. "My girlfriend was supposed to be at the restaurant downstairs, and now she's missing. I need to speak to whoever's in charge." "Sir, as we've explained, we cannot provide information about our guests' whereabouts for privacy reasons," one of the security guards replied with professional calm. "If you're concerned about someone's welfare, perhaps you should contact the appropriate authorities." "I already told you she's not answering her phone. Something's wrong. She would never just disappear like this." I found myself laughing, actually laughing at the absurdity of it. He's right. The old me would never have disappeared like this. She would have waited until closing time, then gone home and pretended everything was fine. "And now?" Alexander asked, his hand finding mine. "Now I'm discovering what it feels like to be unpredictable." On screen, Kevin was growing more agitated by the second. His hair was mussed, his tie askew, and there were sweat stains visible on his expensive shirt. This was not the composed, confident image he worked so hard to project at Sarah's party. "Look, I know she came here tonight. The restaurant hostess said she paid her bill and headed toward the elevators. I just need to know if she's okay." "The restaurant is a separate establishment from the hotel, sir. We have no information about—" "This is ridiculous," Kevin exploded. "Do you know who I am? I work for Chen Industries. We're about to sign a massive contract with this hotel chain. When my boss hears about how I've been treated..." "Actually," Alexander said, pressing a button on his desk, "I think this might be a good time for me to introduce myself." The screen switched to a two-way feed, and suddenly Kevin could see us. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and then pure, undiluted shock. "Eleanor?" His voice cracked like a teenager's. What are you doing up there? Who is that man?" I stood up, smoothing down my dress and walking closer to the camera. "Hello, Kevin. Enjoying Sarah's party?" What? Eleanor, what's going on? Why are you with him? How did you even get up there?" "You know, it's funny," I said, feeling Alexander's presence behind me like a shield. 3 hours ago, I was sitting in that restaurant waiting for you, believing your lies about running late, making excuses for you to the staff. And now I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Eleanor, you're not making sense. Just come down here so we can talk about this properly. Whatever's going on, whatever you think you saw at the party..." "I didn't see anything at the party, Kevin. I didn't need to. I already knew about Sarah." The colour drained from Kevin's face. "How did you know about the secret texts? The late-night phone calls you thought I was sleeping through? The way you've been planning your future with her while using me as your emotional safety net?" I leaned forward, making sure he could see every word on my lips. "I know everything, Kevin. I know about the contract you're trying to secure for her father's company. I know about the promotion you think you'll get when you marry into the Chen family. I know about the apartment you've been looking at in Sarah's neighbourhood." Kevin's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Eleanor, I can explain..." "Oh, I'm sure you can. You always have an explanation, don't you? But here's the thing, I don't need to hear it anymore. I'm done listening to your lies." "Who is that man?" Kevin demanded, his voice taking on an edge of hysteria. "Elena, answer me. Who are you with?" Alexander stepped into the camera's view, and I watched Kevin's face transform from confusion to recognition to absolute terror. Every business magazine in the city had featured Alexander Reeves at some point. Kevin knew exactly who he was. "Good evening, Mr. Morrison," Alexander said pleasantly. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced. Alexander Reeves, owner and CEO of Meridian Hotels International." Kevin's legs actually buckled. I watched him grab onto the concierge desk for support, his face going pale as the implications hit him. Mr. Reeves," Kevin stammered, There's been a misunderstanding. Eleanor is my girlfriend, and she's obviously confused about something. If you could just send her down..." "I'm afraid Eleanor is exactly where she wants to be," Alexander interrupted smoothly. "In fact, she's been telling me some fascinating things about your relationship and about your professional conduct." "What? What has she told you?" "Well, for starters, she mentioned that you've been promising your employer that your personal connections would help secure our hotel contract. That's an interesting strategy, considering the woman you were referring to as your connection is currently here with me, having ended your relationship approximately 30 minutes ago." I watched Kevin's world crumble in real time. The security guards stepped closer as he swayed on his feet, clearly worried he might collapse. "Elena," Kevin whispered, his voice breaking. "Elena, please, don't do this. Whatever you think happened tonight, whatever you think you know, we can work through it. We can fix this." "We," I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "Kevin, there is no we anymore. There hasn't been a we for months. I was just too stupid to see it. But I love you. I've always loved you. Yes, I made mistakes, but..." "You love the idea of me," I corrected. You love having someone who'll wait for you, who'll make excuses for your behaviour, who'll be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you throw my way. But you don't love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have forgotten our anniversary. If you loved me, you wouldn't have been texting another woman. If you loved me, you wouldn't have spent tonight celebrating her birthday while I sat alone in a restaurant for 3 hours. Eleanor, please. And if you loved me, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word, you wouldn't have been planning to use me to advance your career while secretly building a life with someone else. Alexander's hand settled on my shoulder, a gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed by Kevin. His eyes fixated on that simple touch like it was a bomb about to explode. As for your professional situation, Mr. Morrison, Alexander said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives, I'm afraid I'll need to reconsider Chen Industries' proposal. You see, I make it a policy not to do business with companies whose employees demonstrate such questionable character. No! Kevin shouted, causing several hotel guests to turn and stare. No, you can't do that. That contract isn't about me. It's about the company. There are hundreds of jobs at stake. Then, perhaps you should have considered that before you decided to treat my friend so poorly, Alexander replied coolly. Actions have consequences, Mr. Morrison. I would have thought someone in your position would understand that. Kevin turned his desperate gaze back to me. Eleanor, you can't let him do this. Think about Sarah's father. Think about all the innocent people who'll be affected. Think about us. There is no us, Kevin. There hasn't been for a long time. I was just too blind to see it. I felt tears pricking at my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of freedom, of finally letting go of something that had been slowly killing me. I wasted 3 years believing in a future that only existed in my imagination. I won't waste another minute. Security, Alexander said quietly into his intercom. Please escort Mr. Morrison from the premises and ensure he understands that he is no longer welcome in any Meridian property. No, wait! Kevin called out as the guards moved to flank him. Eleanor, Elena, don't do this. We can fix this. I can change. I can be better. But I was already turning away from the screen, walking back toward the windows that overlooked the city. Behind me, I could hear Kevin's protests growing fainter as security led him away. How do you feel? Alexander asked softly. I considered the question, taking inventory of my emotions. There was sadness, yes, but it was the clean sadness of an ending, not the desperate grief of loss. There was anger, but it was righteous anger, the kind that burns away what's broken to make room for something new. Free, I said finally, terrified and exhilarated and completely uncertain about what comes next, but free. Good, Alexander said, moving to stand beside me at the window, because what comes next is entirely up to you. Below us, I could see Kevin being escorted out of the hotel, his figure small and insignificant against the grandeur of the building. In a few hours, when Sarah's party ended, he'd have to explain why his girlfriend had disappeared, why the hotel contract was in jeopardy, why his carefully constructed world was falling apart. But that wasn't my problem anymore. For the first time in 3 years, Kevin Morrison's problems weren't my problems. Alexander, I said, turning to face him fully, what exactly are you offering me? His smile was warm and devastating and full of promises. Everything, Eleanor. I'm offering you everything. 3 months later, I stood in Alexander's private office, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Kevin's life continued its spectacular downward spiral. The irony wasn't lost on me that I could see the Chen Industries building from here. The same building where Kevin was probably being fired at this very moment. The board meeting just ended, Alexander said, hanging up his phone and moving to stand behind me, his hands settling on my shoulders. Chen Industries officially lost the Meridian contract this morning. They're restructuring the entire import division. I leaned back against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him, still amazed that this was my life now. And Kevin? Terminated, effective immediately. Apparently, Mr. Chen wasn't pleased to learn that his potential son-in-law had been lying about his connections and using company resources to plan his personal life. Alexander's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Sarah broke off their engagement last week when she found out about the contract situation. So he lost everything. Everything he thought mattered? Yes. I turned in his arms, studying his face. Over the past 3 months, I'd learned to read Alexander's expressions, and there was something else there. Something he wasn't telling me. What is it? Your ex-boyfriend has been persistent in his attempts to contact you. My security team intercepted another letter yesterday. Kevin's been writing letters? The thought of him, desperate and broken, still trying to reach me should have stirred some sympathy. Instead, I felt nothing but mild curiosity. 17 letters, actually. All of them begging for forgiveness, promising he's changed, claiming he's realised what he lost. Alexander's jaw tightened. The latest one included a rather detailed suicide threat if you don't respond. A chill ran down my spine. In my previous life, Kevin had never been the type for dramatic gestures. He was manipulative, yes, but in subtle ways. Emotional blackmail wasn't his usual style. You think he's serious? I think he's desperate. Desperate men do desperate things. Alexander walked to his desk and pulled out a manila envelope. There's something else. Something I've been waiting to tell you until I was certain you were ready to hear it. The weight in his voice made my stomach clench. What kind of something? The night you died, in your previous timeline, it wasn't an accident. The world tilted sideways. I gripped the back of a chair, my legs suddenly unsteady. What do you mean it wasn't an accident? Kevin was driving the other car. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank into the chair, my mind reeling. That's impossible. Kevin doesn't even drive. He always said it was better for the environment to use ride shares and public transportation. He lied about that too. Alexander's voice was gentle but relentless. He'd been secretly taking driving lessons for months, planning to surprise Sarah with a car for her birthday. The same birthday party you discovered that night. My hand started shaking. You're saying Kevin killed me? Not intentionally. When you left the restaurant that night, in your original timeline, you were upset, crying, not paying attention to traffic signals. Kevin was racing back from Sarah's party, panicked because someone had told him you'd been seen leaving. He ran a red light and hit your car at 60 miles per hour. But if it was an accident, he didn't stop, Eleanor. He hit you and drove away, left you dying in the wreckage while he went home to establish an alibi. The police never found the other driver. The room spun around me. 3 months of building a new life, of healing, of falling in love, and now this. How do you know all this? Alexander's expression was carefully neutral. Because I've been investigating Kevin Morrison for a very long time. Something in his tone made me look up sharply. How long? Since the night he killed you. The words hung in the air between us like a bomb waiting to explode. Alexander, what are you talking about? How could you have been investigating him since that night if this is a different timeline? He moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back in the pose I'd come to recognize as his thinking position. Eleanor, there's something about me that you need to understand. Something I've been waiting to tell you until I was sure you could handle it. What? My voice came out as barely a whisper. I'm not from this timeline either. The chair seemed to disappear beneath me. What? I died that night too, Eleanor. 3 hours after you did, from a heart attack brought on by watching the woman I'd been in love with for months get killed by her worthless boyfriend. My mind couldn't process what he was saying. That's impossible. You're telling me we both came back. Yes, both got a second chance. The difference is, I remembered everything immediately. You had to live through the pain again to remember what Kevin really was. Alexander turned to face me, his eyes dark with an emotion I couldn't name. I've spent every day of these past 3 months falling in love with you all over again, while also planning the complete destruction of the man who killed us both. The room was silent except for the sound of my ragged breathing. You've been manipulating this entire situation. Yes, the contract, Kevin's job, even my being in that restaurant that night. I knew exactly when and where Kevin would abandon you because I lived through it before. I knew you'd eventually walk away because I believed in the strength I saw in you that first time, even when you couldn't see it yourself. Alexander's voice was steady, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. What I didn't manipulate was how I felt about you. That was real from the very beginning. I stood up abruptly, pacing to the other side of the room. So, this whole time, while I thought I was taking control of my life, making my own choices, you were just orchestrating everything? Eleanor, no. I spun to face him, anger flooding through me. You let me think I was being brave, that I was finally standing up for myself, when really I was just playing a part in your revenge fantasy. That's not true, isn't it? You said it yourself. You knew exactly what Kevin would do because you'd seen it before. You knew I'd leave the restaurant. You knew I'd come to you. You knew he'd come looking for me. You've been playing chess with my life. Alexander's composure finally cracked. You want to know the truth, Eleanor? The whole truth? Fine, yes, I orchestrated Kevin's downfall. Yes, I made sure you'd end up here with me. But do you know why? Because you wanted revenge. Because I couldn't live in a world where you were dead and that bastard got everything he wanted. Alexander's voice echoed off the walls. Because I spent every night for 3 months in the original timeline watching him marry Sarah, watching him inherit your money, watching him live the life he'd stolen from you while you rotted in a grave he put you in. Tears were streaming down my face now. So you brought me back to use me. I brought you back because I loved you and because justice demanded it. Alexander stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Eleanor, in our original timeline, I approached you after Kevin stood you up that night. I told you that you deserved better, that he wasn't worth your tears. Do you know what you said to me? I shook my head, unable to speak. You said that someday you hoped to meet a man who would love you enough to fight for you. Someone who would see your worth even when you couldn't see it yourself. Alexander's hand reached out to touch my face, his thumb brushing away my tears. I fought for you, Eleanor. I literally moved heaven and earth to bring you back, to give you the life you deserved. If that makes me manipulative, then I'll own that label. But you lied to me about who you were. I waited until you were strong enough to handle the truth. That Elena, who sat in that restaurant 3 months ago, wasn't ready to learn that her boyfriend had killed her in another timeline. She needed to rediscover her worth first. I stared at him, this man who'd turned my world upside down in the most beautiful and terrible way possible. What happens now? That depends on you. Alexander stepped back, giving me space. You can walk away. You can decide that this is all too much, too complicated, too manipulative. I'll understand. And Kevin? Kevin will face the consequences of his actions regardless. The police are reopening the hit-and-run case from 3 months ago. Turns out, when you know exactly what to look for, evidence has a way of surfacing. I moved to the window, looking down at the city spread below us. Somewhere out there, Kevin was probably drowning his sorrows, blaming everyone but himself for his failures. Sarah was likely relieved to have escaped a relationship built on lies, and here I was in love with a man who'd literally brought me back from the dead, but had lied to me about almost everything. "Eleanor?" Alexander said softly behind me. "I need you to know something. Everything I told you about loving you, about wanting to give you the life you deserve, that was real. The manipulation was about Kevin's downfall, not about my feelings for you." "How do I know that's true?" "Because I'm telling you the truth now, when I could lose everything by doing it." His voice was raw with emotion. "I could have kept lying, could have let you believe this was all your choice. But I love you too much to build our life on deception." I turned to face him, this man who'd orchestrated my revenge while stealing my heart. "Show me the letters." "Eleanor, show me what Kevin wrote." Alexander hesitated, then walked to his safe and withdrew a thick stack of papers. I took them with trembling hands, recognizing Kevin's handwriting immediately. The first letter was what I'd expected. Apologies, excuses, promises to change. But as I read further, the tone shifted. Desperation crept in, then anger, then threats. By the final letter, Kevin wasn't begging anymore. He was demanding I come back, claiming I belonged to him, threatening to hurt himself or others if I didn't respond. "He's completely lost his mind," I whispered. "Guilt and failure will do that to a man like Kevin. He's never had to face real consequences before." I set the letters down and looked at Alexander. Really looked at him. This man who'd loved me enough to defy death itself, who'd orchestrated an elaborate revenge while protecting me from the worst truths, who was now standing there waiting for me to decide our fate. "If I stay," I said slowly, "I need complete honesty from now on. No more secrets, no more manipulation, no matter how well-intentioned." "You'll stay?" "I love you," I admitted, the words feeling like a revelation. "I love the man who saw my worth when I couldn't, who fought for me in ways I never imagined possible. But I also need to know that the woman I've become is real, not just another part of your plan." Alexander crossed the room in 3 quick strides, pulling me into his arms. "Elena Morrison is dead," he said fiercely. "The woman standing here is Elena Reeves. If you'll have my name, and she's the strongest, most magnificent person I've ever known. That transformation was all you." As his lips met mine, I felt the last pieces of my old life falling away. Somewhere in the city, Kevin was facing the consequences of his choices. But here, in Alexander's arms, I was facing the rewards of mine. "There's one more thing," I said against his lips. "If we're doing this, if we're building a life together, I want to be your equal partner. In business, in life, in everything." Alexander's smile was radiant. "I was hoping you'd say that, because Meridian Hotels is about to undergo a major expansion, and I need a brilliant, ruthless, absolutely extraordinary woman to help me run it." "Ruthless?" I laughed. "I like the sound of that." "Good," he said, spinning me around until I was breathless with laughter. "Because revenge is just the beginning, Mrs. Reeves. Now we build an empire." As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I realized that dying had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It had taken losing everything to finally understand what I was worth. And Kevin Morrison? He was about to learn that some mistakes echo across lifetimes, and some women are worth moving heaven and earth to protect. The real story was just beginning.